Preparing for an essay exam. This tutorial will help you learn how to prepare better for essay exams, which will improve your retention of information and reduce your test anxiety. And that will help you write a better essay and earn a higher grade on your exam. This tutorial covers how to cope with test anxiety, how to know what to expect from the exam, ways to study for the exam, and what to do in the exam period. First, an important term, test anxiety. Test anxiety is that nervous feeling you get when you're going to take a test. Your palms can get sweaty, you can feel butterflies in your stomach, or your mind can go completely blank. For some people, test anxiety makes us apathetic. We develop a why bother attitude and convince ourselves that there's no way to study for an essay exam. We decide to wing it. Many of us feel a little nervous before a test, even when we are well prepared. Some people, however, have severe test anxiety. They may feel that they will vomit or hyperventilate, and they are utterly unable to do their best. Today's tutorial will help you with mild to average test anxiety, but if you do have severe test anxiety, you will want to stop by PCC's Psychological Services Center in L108. For more information about psychological services, go to the PCC website at www.pasadena.edu, click on Student Services, and scroll down until you see Psychological Services. Here you can find out about confidentiality, the services, and how to make an appointment. So, how do you cope with your average test anxiety? Right before and during the test, you can use all the helpful strategies you use in any life situation that creates stress. Make sure that you're well rested and have had a good breakfast. Take some deep breaths. Tense and relax each of your major muscle groups, starting at your feet. And do whatever else you might normally do to get psyched up for something like a big game, a big date, or a job interview. What shouldn't you do? Don't cram right before the test. Also, don't talk about how nervous you are. That'll only make you feel worse if you complain about how nervous or unprepared you are. And definitely avoid those friends of yours who are complaining about the test or going on and on about how nervous they are. You don't need the bad vibes. The best way to reduce test anxiety is good test preparation. Understanding what the test will be testing, understanding the exam format, studying effectively, and using the writing process during the exam will help you feel prepared and do your best. The rest of this tutorial walks you through some simple steps to take to prepare well for the exam. We'll help you take a systematic approach to studying and get into a test preparation routine that you can use for all your classes. Understanding the purpose of essay exams is a good place to start. Bloom's taxonomy of thinking is useful in this regard. When professors have students write essay exams, it's because they are trying to make students do what's known as higher level thinking. Let's take a quick tour of the various levels of knowledge in Bloom's taxonomy. As you move up the pyramid, you get more complex thinking tasks. At the bottom is knowledge. This basic level merely asks, what do you already know about a topic? But if we stayed at this level, there wouldn't be any point in taking classes to learn new things, would there? Going up the pyramid is comprehension. This level asks, do you understand what you have recently learned about the material? In other words, can you explain in your own words what you have read in the class readings or heard in lecture? Next up is application. Can you apply what you have learned to a new context or situation? For instance, perhaps you've learned about urbanization in the United States in a history class. Can you apply that concept to another country? Next is analysis. This is a word that gives students a lot of grief, as it's used in a variety of ways. Essentially, analysis is asking you to take a complex thing, for example, an article, a poem, or a historical event, and break it down into parts so that you can better understand the big picture. For instance, you could analyze the way an author structures an article so you can see his or her main points in a better, that is, a deeper and more sophisticated way. Many English exams ask for analysis. Next up is synthesis. In writing a synthesis, You take a variety of texts, such as a variety of articles, that are roughly on the same topic, and you come up with new ideas about that topic based on the ideas that you read. Often, you do synthesis of other people's ideas to propose the best solution to a complicated problem. Finally, at the top of the pyramid, we have what is considered the highest level, evaluation. Evaluation is when you take a position and defend it with evidence from the text or texts. In other words, make an argument. Obviously, there's a lot of overlap in these categories, and professors often write questions that ask for a combination of these types of thinkings, as we shall see in a moment when we look at sample questions. Don't spend any time right now trying to memorize the chart. Just know that essay exams ask you to do a variety of types of thinking, and know that part of the job of being a student is to figure out what is expected of you. So let's talk about how to do that. Understanding test format and content. It's helpful to understand what will be on the test and what form it will take. We can do that through a variety of means. First, look at your syllabus. Reread whatever is written about the test, how it might be structured, what it will cover, and how many points it is worth. Next, look at the rubric the teacher has given to you. This gives you some clear sense of the expectations on which you will be graded. Then look at your notes. Hopefully you took some. If not, ask a friend in class to study with you, and together you can put your notes on paper. Usually, professors give a few hints about test questions throughout the semester, or they keep returning to the same themes and topics. Generally, you can figure these themes and topics will show up on the test. If your syllabus, your notes, and your friends don't give you enough information, ask the teacher either in class or privately in office hours or via email. Let's look at one sample English 1A midterm rubric. You can see here that the professor clearly spells out what she will be evaluating. By reviewing this beforehand, you will have a good sense of what you need to accomplish in the exam and what you will be graded on. If the professor doesn't give you a rubric for the exam, take a look at the course SLOs, which are on the syllabus and in your handbook. These are generally a good guideline of the expectations. You might also look at the rubric the professor gave on previous out-of-class essays. While the expectations for in-class exams and out-of-class essays are usually not identical, a comparison will give you some useful review of the professor's expectations. Here we see a fairly typical rubric. It includes sections such as, does the exam respond to the topic? In other words, does it answer the question? Is the thesis clear, focused, compelling, and on topic? And here, for the body of the paper, the students are asked to summarize the readings and then analyze them. Next is a section on organization, structure, and paragraphs. It looks at organization and development, support, again, and transitions. Finally, there's a section on the conclusion. Does it explain why the issue is important, talk about more implications, and show us why the reader should care? For each of these areas, the student will be evaluated on a 4-point scale from exceeding expectations, meeting most expectations, meeting some expectations, or below expectations. Again, this is a fairly standard format that will be adapted widely. Understanding the basic purpose of a rubric can help you know how to do best on your test. Once you've gathered information about the content and format, you're ready to study. Many students feel that they can't study the content for an essay exam, but that's not true. In fact, essay exams usually assume that you have deep familiarity with a topic, the kind of familiarity that you can best get by thinking through the material beforehand. So, how do you do that? One thing you can do is to take a few minutes to read through your notes and annotations, to flip through the readings again, to look at the table of contents for your book, or the questions for discussion or key terms that are listed in the book. This will refresh your memory about the major topics that you've covered in class. It might be helpful to go back and read through the weekly schedule for the course and the course syllabus. Sometimes that helps get a big picture view. Charting is a technique that forces you to review the material in depth. helps you synthesize multiple course materials, helps you analyze complex texts and think more deeply about the material, and helps you take a step back and see the big picture. Here's a pretty typical example of a student chart for an English composition class essay exam. The student has read several articles at this point in the semester. In the chart, we are synthesizing multiple texts. So the student has read 1, 2, 3, 4 articles: Emerson's Self-Reliance, Du Bois's Of Our Spiritual Strivings, Benedict's The Individual and the Pattern of Culture, and Fromm's The Individual in the Chains of Illusion. The student has also left a space for my ideas. This is helpful for a couple of reasons. First, it helps as you generate your own ideas, you can record them so you don't forget. It's also useful to separate what was your idea from the ideas that you read, so that when you are generating a thesis, you can reach toward individual original ideas of your own. For all the texts, we're going to want to give a brief summary and list the main points and themes. We'll do this for each text, filling out the box, letting it get as big as it needs to, but making sure that we are offering succinct and short generalizations. In the other columns, we've selected 3 topics that have been emphasized repeatedly by the course professor or by other students in discussion. One column is on the relationship of the individual and society. Another is on problems with individualism, and another is kind of a vague what we should do according to the author. Again, there's no right answer for what will be at the top of these columns, but it's useful to articulate for yourself common ideas that are discussed in each of the texts so that you can compare and contrast them, look for patterns and themes. We can see that the student has started to make their chart. They reread or skimmed over Fromm's article and began to fill in a few of the ideas. Once the entire chart is filled in, the student will have a really good picture of how Emerson might be in conversation with Du Bois, or how Fromm and Benedict might get into an argument or a debate. The student will also begin to articulate how their own ideas fit into these great experts in the field. Let's look at another example of a student chart. This one covers only one book. So it's not a synthesis, it's an analysis. In this case, it's an analysis of John Savage's book, Teenage. This is a history book about the development of teenagers. And in the book, it's fairly clearly structured historically from the early 1900s to World War I, to the Depression, to World War II, and to the post-war era. Again, we've listed my ideas, the student ideas, under now. The book doesn't cover the current time period, but obviously the student author has quite a lot to say about his or her own lifetime, so we're going to make sure we include those ideas in the chart. Again, we're starting with summary and major examples. We should list those, and that will require flipping back through the book and refreshing our memory, or looking at our notes, if we took good ones, to fill in the details. The other 4 columns in this case are things that the teacher has repeatedly emphasized throughout the course, and, in one case, the ideas that the student came up with herself. First, how teenagers rebelled and how they tried to be independent of adults. That happened in each time period, but it happened differently in each time period. How they were depicted in the media at the time. We would want to list specific examples so that we didn't forget them when we were sitting down to write the exam. What kinds of language they used or invented, and what forms of creativity they showed. This is the student's own idea, but it's a good one. We want to include that. Once the student has filled out the whole chart, she'll be very well prepared for that essay exam. Okay, so let's review. So far, we've learned that the best way to reduce test anxiety and do your best on an exam is to prepare well for them. And we've learned that the best way to prepare well is to review the material and synthesize it. Charting is a good way to do that. In the next segment of the tutorial, we'll talk about how to interpret the essay exam question and what to do during the actual test.